Everyone, welcome to Money Talks, and this is our presentation on financial pitfalls. I am Ariel Clifton. I'm a team member of STEM Connect and also coordinator for the GCC Money Talks program. Okay. A couple things. One, a quick disclaimer that in any of our Money Talks presentations, the presenters, including myself, are not financial advisors. This is financial education, not financial advice. Also, for those that are on with us live, be sure that you stay to complete the module quiz and survey. This is especially important if you are participating for honors or for extra credit. Okay. Our main goals, I was mentioning before I start recording that there have a lot of content. So if you are watching the replay, you may want to grab something to take notes with because I have a lot of content to give you. There's a lot of different financial pitfalls, and many of these could be their own session into themselves. So this is really more about, tonight's session is more about giving you a better idea of the different ones, and then you can then see what ones you really want to start diving into and go a little bit deeper. And part of the strategy for that is that a lot of times in life, particularly when it comes to money, but really for anything, a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. And if you don't know about a topic at all, it's hard for you to be aware of it. It's hard for you to ask questions because you don't know to ask about that. So that's what I really want to do tonight is just raise the awareness level and give you some things to consider and to keep in mind. So as we dive into these, some of them we're just going to touch on very quickly, and others we're going to dive into a little bit deeper, a little bit more deeply. Some of the ones that we're going to talk about as well as managing money, technology changes, also known as future proofing, using credit responsibly, and issues with friends and family. Okay, so with this expanded content that I have for us this semester, I thought, let's do it countdown style. So here goes. We are counting down 10 financial pitfalls to avoid. All right. Number 10 is not considering taxes. We have students who, I hear from students that they're very interested in investing, and that's great. But one thing to know is that if you're investing and it's not in a retirement account, with retirement accounts it works a little bit differently, but with brokerage accounts, especially like when people start getting into, oh, I want to buy and sell, and they get into like, oh, I want to do day trading, you pay taxes on that. And when you are not holding things for a longer term, like more than a year, then you're going to pay an even higher rate of taxes. So as you do something like that, I'm not saying, that you should never do it, but you do want to keep in mind that you will wind up paying taxes. You don't want to be surprised by a tax bill. Okay. Working in the gig economy. So if you're doing something like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart, any of these, for the most part, as far as I know right now, they are considered independent contractors. So it works as though you are your own business person, where you have to keep expenses, and there's a number of other things that are different. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but you do want to be aware that things are different. You're not an employee. I've even heard that there's some lawsuits because some people feel like they really should be employees and not have to deal with some of these other issues. I haven't heard anything more about where that was falling out. So as far as I know right now, they're still considered independent contractors. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And related to taxes, not necessarily a pitfall, but it is an area where if you don't know, you could miss out on money, but hopefully you're going to learn about it right now, and maybe this is an opportunity to recapture some money. Sometimes people get confused between being a dependent, and they think that if their parents are claiming them as a dependent, then it means that they can't file a tax return. Well, that's not true. And if you have been working and you're paying taxes most likely right off of your paycheck, you may be entitled to all or some of that back as a refund. And don't think it's just as a refund, it's money of yours that you paid for taxes that you're entitled to have back. So that's something, if you're thinking, oh, I'm a dependent and therefore I can't file taxes. No, that's not correct. So look into that and see whether you might be able to get some of your money back. Okay. Number 9, not understanding tenant rights and obligations. Um, and I actually had worked for a while as a real estate agent, and but not doing traditional real estate, helping people locate apartments. So I got to see a lot of different things, and that's why this came up to my mind. I would see people that they left. There was something going on, they left, and they'd say, well, I went to the office and I told them I was leaving, and they said, okay. Well, they probably meant, okay, I heard you, or like, okay, you shouldn't, like wait till you see what's going to happen, just depending upon the person. If an eviction is not only like when a sheriff comes knocking on the door, if you break that lease agreement by leaving and not paying your rent, that's also considered an eviction. And the rental market has gotten really tight. So those things go on your record when you're then trying to get an apartment again, and then it winds up costing you more because you're basically considered a risk. Somewhat similar to the credit issue. For those of you who attended our session on credit, your credit is like your reputation. Likewise, when it comes to renting, you kind of have a reputation with the property management companies, and if you had an eviction, then you're a higher risk because they don't want to have to deal with somebody that they have to evict. Another situation I would see is, that somebody had a roommate and the roommate left, but before they left, maybe there was some damage and they're feeling like, well, the roommate should be responsible, but, the property management company is not going to see them as responsible unless they were on the lease. And if they were on the lease, well, it doesn't mean that you're not part of it as well. You're both responsible. But if they're not on the lease, they can walk away, and um, it's going to be hard for you to do something about that. So plus them not being on the lease, if the property management company finds out, could also potentially put you in an eviction situation if they don't approve of that person and they find out, so that's another thing. So keep those things in mind. Another situation is co-signing for somebody. I have somebody that said, oh, I don't have any evictions. And then lo and behold, we found that, yeah, there was an eviction on their record. And it turns out it was because they co-signed for a sister to get an apartment. And the sister left without seeing the lease agreement through, and not properly getting out of the lease. And therefore that eviction was on both of their records. So yeah, co-signing, it operates as though you are basically in the same situation as that person, okay? So some advice before we leave this topic is look for the Arizona Tenant Handbook so that you can be more knowledgeable and protect yourself. And keep in mind as well, like I said, that I'm not a financial or legal advisor. I'm only speaking from the experiences that I had a few years ago. And that's another thing, is that the knowledge I'm speaking to is as of just a few years ago, which is fairly recent, but things change rapidly. So keep those things in mind. And that leads us right into number 8, which is family and friends. So lending can be a challenging situation. And I'm not saying we want to always be cold-hearted and say no to friends and family, but maybe the thing to do might be try to think through in advance. How are you going to respond if somebody needs help? Do you always say no? Do you help when you can? Maybe there are other ways of helping, especially if it's like, well, you need that money yourself and you feel that you can't, but you don't want to say no. Sometimes there's a better way, or maybe I shouldn't say a better way, but maybe there's another way of helping. Like maybe they need to find a job and you can help them with job resources, or maybe offering them help of, let me help you set up a budget, or, something like that. And Then we also have the issue of co-signing, as I was mentioning. Another risk is sharing information or sharing your credit card. And then not having early and open communication with family, and that includes parents. There were actually a couple of really good videos that I wanted to show, but I'm a little concerned about time, so we're going to only look at a couple of them. Or we're probably only going to look at one of them. But before I go to that video, I wanted to mention as well, divorce is another pitfall. It, obviously is a big emotional impact, but it can also have a very heavy financial impact. And then related to family and friends is sandwich generation, which basically is another way of saying those that are in a situation where they are caring for both parents and children. And so they're kind of caught in the middle, and it's hard to even take care of themselves sometimes because they're so busy, both emotionally and in terms of time, and also financially, trying to take care of both parents and children. But before we leave this topic, I do want us to go ahead and get to the video on 5 money questions to ask your partner, because I think this one is also very important.
Hobbies, you both love dogs and kids, and neither of you listens to dubstep. It might be time for someone to pop the big question.
What's your credit score? Nothing kills the mood like prying into your partner's financial history, so it's not surprising that many young couples will spend hundreds of hours planning their weddings, but almost none preparing their financial merger. And that's kind of a big deal.
Nearly 1 in 3 couples say finances cause the most stress in their relationship, followed distantly by intimacy, children, and in-laws. More than 1/3 of millennials in relationships fight about money at least once a week.
Which is troubling, because couples who disagree about money once a week or more were over 30% more likely to get divorced than those who disagree a couple times a month.
A lot of this marital strife can be avoided just by having a few honest conversations before tying the knot. It can be hard to broach the subject, so to make it easier for all those young lovers out there, here are 5 financial topics you should discuss with your future partner.
Number 1, what do you earn, what do you own, and what do you owe? It can be difficult to reveal this information, but it's best to just rip the Band-Aid off. After all, lack of money is not as bad as a lack of communication. According to one study, 4 in 10 couples don't agree on what their partner's income was, and 10% of them got the number wrong by $25,000 or more. Good planning is impossible if each of you only has half the information, and getting everything out on the table will only strengthen trust.
Philip and I suggest having this talk in 2 parts. Send each other an email with a simple breakdown of your finances. Then, a few days later, come together in a non-judgmental frame of mind to discuss the human story behind those numbers. Number 2, how was money dealt with in your household growing up? As much as we don't like to admit it, we are heavily influenced by the environment we were raised in. So, learning about your partner's family traditions can offer a lot of insight and understanding into their financial habits. Did they grow up on a tight budget? Did one parent run the show, or did they share responsibility? Were they ever taught to balance a checkbook? The second part of that conversation is figuring out what traditions you each grew up with that you don't want to replicate. Maybe your partner's parents struggled with debt, so it's very important to them to not get into that same quagmire.
Number 3, what will be yours, mine, and ours? It's becoming more common for couples to keep separate accounts, even after marriage. Maybe they're afraid of losing independence. Maybe they just haven't gotten around to it yet. But they might be missing out on some benefits of a joint account, like easier organization and transparency.
If you and your partner decide to keep separate accounts, make sure that you're not creating places where secrets can hide. About 1/3 of spouses admit to committing financial infidelity, which means intentionally deceiving your partner about how you're spending or managing money. Of those, 16% ended up in divorce expressly because of it.
And remember, you don't need to have separate accounts to enjoy financial independence. Julia and I have agreed on a set amount of personal splurge money per month. It's always equal, and we can do whatever we want with zero discussion. It gives us space to be ourselves without fear of lectures or petty squabbles.
Number 4, how much do you want to spend on kids? While most couples will talk about whether or not they want kids, far fewer will discuss the massive financial impact, which can start before they're even born. About 15% of couples struggle with infertility, and the cost of a common fertility treatment in the US ranges from about $12,000 to $15,000. The average private adoption costs almost $40,000.
Once you've got the kid, you have to decide about daycare, public school versus private, and of course, college. Right now, the average cost of sending a child to a 4-year public university is around $100,000. It's projected to be double that 18 years from now. Of course, this is an ongoing conversation that you'll be having for many years, but it's important to weigh the financial impact of these choices as early as possible.
Number 5, what are your financial goals in order of priority? Sharing your financial goals with each other can actually be kind of fun, but in our experience, taking on too many goals at once can make it less likely you'll achieve any of them. If one of you is focused on buying a house and the other on starting a business, neither of you may get very far.
But if you join forces and agree on what to tackle first, both of you will get where you want to be faster. A 2015 study asked couples for their best piece of financial advice for newlyweds. The top 2 suggestions were to save as early as possible for retirement and to make all financial decisions together.
Not all of these conversations will result in firm agreements, but when they do, make sure to write them down in a sort of financial constitution and then sign it.
Now, it might sound unromantic, but it's all too easy for 2 people to remember the same conversation differently, and you can always jointly decide to amend your constitution. It's not set in stone.
Of course, if you're already married, you may have skipped over a few of these questions, but take heart. It's never too late to bring them up and turn a fresh page.
And that's our 2 cents. Thank you to Google for supporting PBS.
Okay. So moving on, number 7 is thinking that your degree is an automatic job. Okay. The degree is definitely valuable. Your education is valuable. But you want to consider what jobs are going to be in demand. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes. Another related issue is not completing your degree. You want to remember that even if you don't finish, you're financially responsible. If you've taken loans, you are still responsible for any money that you've borrowed. Because of, and related to this as well, be sure that you are considering your choice of career and a suitable major. And I'd also encourage you to reconfirm. So a lot of times, a student might, they're going in one direction, then they graduate and find they're out there working in it and realize that it wasn't what they thought that it would be. And so as I have the opportunity, I try to encourage students to try to somehow engage with whatever it is that you think is your career objective. You know, and if you're trying to decide between a few different ones, you can do this for a few different ones, or if you feel absolutely sure, go ahead and test that out. Um, Career Services offers some different virtual sessions on things like job shadowing, on chatting with an expert, meaning talking to somebody who's in the field that you're interested in. And when you do that, I like to recommend if you're talking to somebody and they really love what they're doing, balance out with talking with somebody else who's not as happy, so you get a balanced perspective, and vice versa. If you wind up talking to somebody who's not so much a fan of it, they're maybe suffering burnout or regret, whatever, you don't let that color, you know, and make up your mind for you based upon that one person's experience. Um, Try to balance it out and talk with a few people, particularly getting both sides, you know, both perspectives, someone that's happy and somebody who can tell you a different side of the story. And by doing that too, the sooner that you can really reconfirm that choice, the more that you're going to be, you know, you're going to feel confident in that decision, you're going to be excited about it, and you're going to want to stay on track with your program and complete things much more quickly, okay? And if it turns out that, oh, that wasn't quite the right thing afterwards, or you are rethinking, there are career counselors at GCC that can help you revisit, okay, you know, and it's better to course correct sooner. You know, it may not feel great in the moment when you're doubting that decision or wondering if you are, you know, have gone in the right path, but it's better to course correct sooner. So it's worth doing that. And it also helps you to expand your network. Similarly, an internship, once you're able to, some internships require that you reach a certain level of education, but when you're able to, doing an internship, you start to get experience in the field and making connections. And so do these other things like talking with people and job shadowing. If you get a job, even if it's not doing what your ultimate career goal is, but it's somehow connected, that's still another way that you can get some insight and start to make connections. Plus, working your way through college, there's nothing wrong with that. That can help you to offset some of your costs. And then when you're done, you already have some connections and some experience. Next one is over borrowing. So keep your borrowing down. I hope that most of you have come to or will take advantage of the session that we offer on keeping educational costs and student debt down, okay? There's a number of ways that you can do that. If you are going to borrow, a good rule of thumb is research the position that you're likely, your entry-level position after you graduate, and what is likely to be the entry-level income for that position, and make that your cap. So meaning, if your research finds that entry level for your local area, you know, or at least your state level here in Arizona, is $50,000 a year, try to avoid going over borrowing more than $50,000, because remember that you're going to be paying that money back. And if you are borrowing much more than, you know, what you're going to earn, it's going to make things a lot harder for yourself. And certainly if you can keep it further down than that and you can avoid borrowing at all, by all means go for it. But if you need to borrow, at least just be smart about borrowing. Okay. And then not networking while in school, that we kind of already talked about. And this was just kind of a note to myself to mention that there are some events going on through both career services and counseling. Counseling in mid-April, I believe it's April 13th, has a session on how do you start the career exploration process? How do you start that process of deciding on your career? And Career Services is having multiple sessions that are on things like job shadowing, talking with somebody in the field, how do you get an internship? They also do stuff for resumes and job search. So those are a couple of awesome resources that are available to you. Okay, moving on to number 6 is not protecting and leveraging your earning power. So some tips: keep a log of your accomplishments. This can help you on your next round of interviews or even when you're working to negotiate a salary increase. keep good working relationships. In particular, sometimes people will damage their working relationships after they've given notice and they're about to go on to another job. You know what? That's the last impression you're leaving them with, and you don't have a chance to fix it later on. And maybe you need a reference from them later on, and you damage that reputation. All the good work that you did, and then that reputation was damaged. Don't make that mistake. That, if anything, those last few weeks on the job are the time to like really ramp things up, and overperform, and leave things on a good note. You're going to feel great, and they're going to feel good about you, and you'll protect your reputation. And the next topic, this was last semester a much bigger part of the session, but because we have a lot more content, I'm going to go through this pretty quick. But the term for it is future proofing, and it has to do with the world is changing rapidly. So how, when industries are changing and maybe jobs become outsourced or replaced by technology. And I like the concept. I don't like the name so much because to me, future proofing, like waterproofing, would mean that it doesn't get in. I prefer to think of it as future resiliency. But regardless of what we call it, let's go ahead and get started. So your career is your long-term goal, and you want a career that you enjoy and that fits you, and you probably also want to be well paid. You want a career that's in demand so that you're employable long-term. But the world is changing rapidly. So what is future proofing? Many are using this term to describe the ongoing process of keeping ourselves useful in the future despite ongoing change. And here's how you do it. And again, it's not like a one-time thing. You need to be, you want to be thinking about this on an ongoing basis. So keep growing and learning. The future belongs to lifelong learners. So keep your skills up, keep growing, keep your skills up to date, get and stay tech savvy. There's always new technologies, always new software programs coming out. So you want to stay up on things. And scan the environment. Keep yourself informed and stay current on industry trends. Think globally. The more that you know about what's going on in the global the global marketplace, the more convenient it is for you. And consider and be aware of how the global marketplace can impact the industry that you're in, the company that you're in, and or the position that you're in. Develop skills that you can take with you. These are called transferable skills. And you could probably get transferable skills in many jobs, but these are the ones I'm going to talk about are the ones that are like pretty much constantly in demand. Employers ask for, they want and look for people with these skills, okay? And they are communication skills, both written and verbal. Interpersonal skills, that's the ability to work with others. Leadership, which is not just bossing people around, and it's not limited to the boss. It's about developing the ability to positively influence and persuade people and bring them together as a team. And your critical thinking and problem solving skills. If you can solve problems and communicate and work with people, you've got a much better skill set that can serve you well. Okay, and then keep in mind some things that robots probably can't do, and therefore they are less likely to be replaced by technology, is things that require creativity, improvisation, and compassion. Look for industries that have a positive trend and avoid those that are on the decline. Definitely ramping up STEM skills, even if you are not a STEM major. There are, the world, is being impacted by STEM, particularly by technology. So we all need some of that. And there are different areas that get impacted by STEM even when they're not in the STEM fields, but they can be impacted. For instance, law and journalism. But, they need, when say like a patent attorney needs to be able to understand the different technologies that are coming out and things like that, and the different scientific breakthroughs in order to be a patent attorney. Because there's more of these things going on, more journalists need to be able to write about them with knowledge. So it impacts more than just STEM, more than just what we think of traditionally. And be resilient, which means learning to bounce back. But the way that I encourage to think about it is understanding that your career is not your identity. It's part of you, but it's not the sum of you. So being willing to, move on from one thing to another and, just explore different paths and enjoy those routes. Okay, moving on to number 5 is not considering the impact of fees. Be aware of different banking fees, in particular overdraft fees. Banks like to give you overdraft protection, but it's not what it seems. It can actually lead you into paying more fees, which is why they kind of will encourage it. So with the overdraft protection, what can happen is that they're basically, instead of saying, oh, you don't have the funds, they're going to let this transaction go through and you may not realize that you are out of funds. And then they're going to, one, you're going to need to come up with the funds that weren't there. 2, they're going to charge you a fee. And if you didn't realize that, you could possibly go ahead and spend some more money somewhere else, and the whole thing can happen all over again. So be aware of that. A good way around it is, 1, take off the overdraft protection if it's on, and 2, instead set on your account, set some low balance alerts, something where your account will let you know that, hey, you have less than $50 or you have less than $100, whatever amount you want to set. Other fees, particularly if you want to start getting into investing, they're all going to have some type of fee. They have to make their money just like we have to make our money. But actively managed sounds great, but what that really means is that they're going to be more involved in it, and it's a way for them to charge you more money. If that's something that you want, that's fine if you want it, but you want to just be aware of it, or I want you to be aware of it so you're making an informed decision. And by the way, we are looking at possibly adding most probably adding an investing session, but that session is going to be an invite only, where it's basically kind of the reward and incentive for those of you who have taken a real interest in your financial future by coming to all of the sessions. So those that complete all the modules will be eligible to come for that session. So I hope that you'll look forward to doing that and joining us for it. This is just a little bit more on managing money and tracking fees, but I think I kind of covered it already, so we're going to continue on. Related to that is sometimes because there are fees and it gets actually really expensive if you don't have a lot of money in your bank account. Some people become unbanked, but then they wind up having to pay fees elsewhere, for like money orders and things like that. Plus there's time that's taken. There are some other apps that are coming online. So hopefully there are going to be some apps that will help with some of these issues. But in the meantime, be really cautious and be very aware of the fees related to payday loans and title loans. With a title loan, you could potentially lose your car. With payday loans, what tends to happen, and we talked about this a little bit in another session, so hopefully if you haven't already, you'll either attend or do that session through that module through Canvas. But the APR is a way of evaluating how much you're paying, and let's say an expensive credit card, really expensive credit card, a high APR is like 37%. Your payday and title loans would come out to around 300 and 400% if you calculate the APR. But people think, well, I just need this money for a little while and I'll just pay this fee of $40, $50 and I'll be able to pay it back in a week or two. But the week or two comes around and often they don't have the money, so they extend it again, and it keeps happening. And by the time that they're done, they've spent a lot more money for that, for getting out that. Please try to avoid that. All right, scams and fraud is number 4. So thinking that a scam can't happen to you makes you more vulnerable. Instead, stay alert and in the know as much as possible. The Federal Trade Commission, which is FTC, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, are excellent sources of information. I want you to know is that the IRS will not call or email. They send official hard copy U.S. mail, okay? If somebody calls or you get an email and they're claiming to be the IRS and you've not contacted the IRS, then it is not the IRS, okay? So it's some type of a scam. So be on the lookout because there's a lot of different things that are going on right now. Identity theft is another type of scam, another type of fraud, and young people are targeted, okay, for this, as are social media users, which a lot of young people are. So because of that, Jason, who was with us for the credit and debt session, will be coming back, and we'll have a session coming up on April 27th at 1 p.m. So if you want to learn more about identity theft, what it is, how do you prevent it, what do you do if it does happen, I encourage you to come and join us for that.
Con artists, flim-flammers, hucksters, scammers, mountebanks. There are as many financial frauds as there are names for the people who perpetrate them. But here are 5 of the most popular methods of parting a victim from their money and how you can protect yourself.
In 1920, Charles Ponzi had an amazing investment opportunity for New Englanders, guaranteeing a 50% return in just 45 days on something having to do with mail order coupons. Incredible? Try unbelievable. There actually were no returns. Ponzi was just using new investment dollars to pay back previous investors. Eventually, the scheme fell apart. Ponzi ended up owing $7 million and spent 14 years in jail.
Ever since then, anytime a money manager uses new investments to pay returns on previous investments, it's known as a Ponzi scheme. The most famous example was perpetrated by Bernie Madoff, who ran a high-level Ponzi scheme for 20 years that bilked investors out of somewhere between 10 and $20 billion, with a B.
Before accepting an investment opportunity, you should look up a broker's background and complaint history on FINRA's brokercheck.org, and you can request written evidence that the investment professional is a sworn fiduciary.
A close cousin to the Ponzi scheme is the pyramid scheme. Say someone offers you a no-fail way to make money just by joining their organization for a $100 fee. Your job is then to find new recruits who each pay you their $100 sign-up fee, 10% of which you give to the person who signed you up. If you manage to sign up 10 people, you just made $900 from your $100 investment. And if each of those 10 people finds 10 people, you get another $900 for doing absolutely nothing, and so on and so on.
Like a Ponzi scheme, there is no actual investment. All returns come from finding new investors, and when those run out, the whole thing collapses, leaving the people at the bottom of the pyramid with nothing.
This may sound a bit like a multi-level marketing company, but in a landmark 1979 ruling, the Federal Trade Commission decided that Amway was not a pyramid scheme because distributors did actually have to sell products to make money. If a business seems to stress recruitment over sales, that may be a red flag. So before getting involved in an MLM, ask your contact for information on the success ratios of new members and how the company makes its profits.
Made infamous in movies like Boiler Room and Wolf of Wall Street, the pump and dump scam is when an organization artificially inflates the value of a stock that they already own a lot of, usually by aggressive cold calling, spam emails, and sometimes even fake news reports. When enough suckers have bought in, the scammer sells all their shares at the inflated price, sending the price tumbling back down and wiping out most people's investments.
Getting rich quick on the stock market is incredibly rare. If someone tells you they have a hot stock tip or they know what the next big thing is going to be, ask yourself why they would share this valuable information with you.
Imagine getting a phone call from the IRS informing you that you owe additional taxes that must be paid immediately or a warrant will go out for your arrest. Maybe they even tell you that police are already en route to your house, but it can be all cleared up with a quick wire transfer of $1,000.
Many people are so rattled by a phone call like this and so confused by tax laws that they'd rather go along with it than risk making the IRS angry. But there are certain things the IRS will never do. They will never contact you by phone or email first. You'll always get a letter. They will never demand payment in a specific form, and they will never threaten to have local law enforcement arrest you for not complying. If you get this phone call and are feeling uncertain, you should just call the IRS directly to check if the request is real.
Hello, Mr. Olson. This is Joyce from your state bank. I'm calling because we suspect an unauthorized transaction on your account.
Oh no!
Before we continue, I just need some information to verify that I'm speaking to the real Philip Olson.
Sure, my birthday is... my social security number is... and my mother's maiden name is... How's that?
I mean, yeah, that'll do.
Hello? Hello?
Sometimes the easiest way for a scammer to get your personal info is to just call you up and ask for it. They might already know some things about you, like your address or your bank, and just need you to fill in the blanks under the guise of confirming your identity.
The digital version of this is known as phishing, where the scammer sends out emails disguised to look like they're from trusted sources. These emails typically contain a link that brings the victim to an imposter website, where they're asked to enter account details like passwords or credit card numbers.
Whether it's a phone call or an email or a text message, you should never give your information to someone who contacts you. It's always safer to contact the company yourself by calling their official phone number or navigating to their website directly.
Typically, if an individual or organization is on the level, they won't have any problem with you verifying their identity or looking into their track record. They should welcome it.
And of course, we'd all love to get rich overnight, and scammers know it. The best defense is remembering the old adage, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And that's our 2 cents.
Do you have first-hand experience with financial frauds? Are there any...
Okay, so hopefully that video helped to give you an idea of some of the scams that are out there, and similar to the IRS type of scam where somebody's calling and demanding. Sometimes it doesn't always have to be the IRS. It could also be some type of a debt collection type of a scam. There was actually another video I'd come across, but I was just like, okay, we can't put all of them in. So I went with this one because it gives you a bit more. But the other one would have talked about how sometimes they claim that it's a debt that you owe. If you actually owe the debt, then they should be willing to tell you what company is, give you their name and things like that, and give you the details. If they're not, then it's probably better to trust your instincts, and hang up. You can always like find out, okay, what's their company name or something like that, and look into it. So don't let them, try to say, oh, they're going to send the police, or something like that. They're going to send the, law enforcement. No. All right, moving on. In our countdown, number 3 is not handling credit and debt responsibly. So having no credit can be a financial pitfall because, you do want to have it probably for that shouldn't be your primary for emergencies. We'll talk in a little bit about other things for emergencies, but there are other reasons. Credit can help you get better rates on insurance, on loans, can help you if you're trying to rent an apartment. So it's good to have it, but it's better to also have that habit where you pay in full. Will then give you good credit and also help you to stay out of debt. Okay, so use that credit wisely. Remember as well that some employers also check your credit, so do be aware of that. If you have debt, one of the things that sometimes people will consider doing is debt consolidation. It can work for some people because then you're just paying, you can basically take out a loan, maybe through a bank or a credit union, and pay off all the other, credit cards and whatnot, and then you just make one payment. But the downside is that sometimes what happens is that then now you have these clear up credit cards and people then turn around and start using those credit cards again. Well, now you have that loan to pay back and now you have credit cards that you start to charge up again. So it can be a strategy for some people, but I think for most people, it's just a temptation and that winds up leading them astray. So think long and hard about whether you really, and I hope that you're not even in that situation to be looking at it, but just to be aware of that sometimes it can backfire. And then student borrowing, which we've touched on a little bit already. And again, I encourage you to take advantage of the replay or come to a future session of keeping your educational costs and student debt down. I like this cartoon. I've shared this one before where the student is coming home to live with parents with 5-figure student debt, and the parent is saying, you know, your mother and I started out with nothing, and the students coming home saying, I would love to be starting out with nothing, because they're worse than nothing. They've got the student debt hanging over their head. And because of that, sometimes people are delaying, whether it's marriage or buying a house or starting a family. There's just other things that are going on that are impacting them related to this. So by all means, do what you can to try to keep that down. All right, coming down to number 2, we're almost down to number 1. But before we do it, number 2 is following the norm. For many people, what's normal is living paycheck to paycheck, the consumer lifestyle, not managing money, having no emergency fund. And because that seems normal, well, we all look to each other and we want to fit in. That's what we've been doing our whole lives since we've, been little kids. We want to fit in with everybody else. But if what's going on isn't so great, do you want to follow that norm? And this is something that we talk about more in Money a New Start, which is next Thursday. So I hope you're going to be joining me for that session, because we'll dive into this a bit more. But related to that, as well as lifestyle inflation, that's very normal as well. Somebody gets a job and a pay increase, and there's more money, but the better job means they feel that they want or need, I'll do need in air quotes, better clothes and a better car. And for many people, no matter how much they make, they still wind up living paycheck to paycheck because of that lifestyle inflation. And we've talked in one of the other sessions about some of the ways of, trying to live on less than you earn, putting more towards savings. And one of the best ways is, saving, making your savings automatic, so that, it's just like when you pay taxes right off the top of your paycheck and you do without that money. When you pay yourself first, think of it almost like taxing yourself for something for your future and for your future self. You deserve that, and you will likewise manage, just like you adjust to all the other things that come off your paycheck first. And then related to saving, I also am a fan of this one, about, is this how you save money? Because for many people, this is how they save money. Hey, there's going to be a big sale, and do you know how much I can save if I get there when the doors open? And he says, we're going to be rich. Well, that's never going to work, because that's not how you save money. It's spending less. And spending less can help you if you're on a tight budget, if it's something that you need. But, going out, a lot of times we get into this adrenaline of, got this bargain, but it's not a great bargain if it's something that we didn't really need and we're spending because we believe that we're saving. That it really doesn't make sense when you start to think of it, but we get caught up in it and in that way of thinking. So hopefully this is the opportunity to stop and kind of reevaluate that a little bit and look to do something different. All right, here we go, folks. Number 1 is not managing your money and yourself. Yourself is a big part of it as well, okay? Because fear and overwhelm can cause procrastination, resulting in not getting started. thinking I'm just not good with money, then it's just like, okay, you're just going to dismiss it. But you know what? Money is going to impact us all throughout our lives. And the better way to kind of put it in its place is to actually deal with it. When we don't deal with it, then it kind of comes up in ways that we may not like. So the more that we confront it instead and start to manage it, the better off that we are. Related to this is not getting new knowledge, maybe because you just say, oh, I'm not good with money, and so you're not getting new knowledge. Or you gain the new knowledge, but you're not adjusting behavior. And behavior as well is part of what we talk about next week in Money and New Start. We tend to think that if things are okay now, that they're always going to be okay. And that sometimes works contrary to planning for the future. And likewise, sometimes when things are not so okay, we tend to feel like, oh, they're always going to be like this. But at that point, when things are not okay, it may be really challenging to plan for the future because maybe that's when we don't have as many resources. So we really need to be doing that when things are a little bit better, although we want to try to do it all the time. But particularly when things are better is when we want to. That's when we're in a better state of mind and hopefully have more resources. So let's take advantage of that to think that and remember that, hey, it's not always going to be, it's good that things are pretty good right now, but that doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. And related to that planning for the future, we don't plan to fail, we just fail to plan. And that includes not getting started, not having a plan for the unexpected. So related to that, here's something related to planning for the unexpected is usually I start out with a game. I wasn't sure we'd have time, but thankfully we do have some time. We have a few minutes that we can go ahead and play this game. So let me pause for a second. And those that are on the replay can just go to it. There's a total of 4 rounds, but even if you play just a few rounds, try to play 3 if you can, and go to thebummergame.com. So hopefully that you enjoy playing Bummer. And even though it's not the most realistic set of circumstances, it does give you some idea of how unexpected things can happen in life. So what are some actions that you can take to prepare? Having insurance is one way of protecting yourself from the unexpected. And hopefully through that game, one of the things that you start to see is that the more that you spend on the premium, obviously the better the better insurance that you're going to get. But another way of reducing your cost is to have a higher deductible. But that means you need to also be ready for more out-of-pocket expenses. So either way, then you want to have the insurance alone is not enough. You still want to have an emergency fund. And we've touched on this before for those of you who have been on our session on managing money. But I'll stress it again because the importance of having that emergency fund, because unexpected things happen, and you don't want your credit cards to be your first line of defense for emergencies. You want to be thinking in terms of insurance, particularly because some things can be very expensive, and that's really what you want to insure for the things that are really expensive, not for the things that are the $400, $500. If the insurance is expensive for you, then having a higher deductible is a way of reducing how much you pay for the insurance. But then you've got to have a plan for how are you going to deal with that higher deductible. So again, that brings us right back to having that emergency fund. And we've talked before as well about how although the emergency fund it really should be 3 to 6 months of expenses. You don't have to start with that as your goal. There are statistics that show that about half of adults could not afford a $400 expense. So even if you start with a smaller goal of $300 to $500, $1,000, whatever it feels reasonable to you, and start. Start with that goal. When you get to that goal, celebrate that you hit that goal, and then you can increase your goal and say, okay, great, I got there. Now I hit that $500 goal. Now I'm going to build my emergency savings to $1,000, and then continue on and work your way up to having that 3 to 6 month, emergency fund. And most of all, start now. You know, and be sure that you are paying yourself first. As I mentioned, one of the best ways is doing it, make it automatic. I actually like that term, automatically. It grows automatically. When you make it automatic, you don't have to make that decision all the time. It's done for you, coming right off the top of your paycheck, but you've got to set it in place. You don't have to start big. You can start with something small. If what you feel you can handle right now is, I don't know, $25 a paycheck, start with $25 a paycheck. Down the road, I would encourage you to make it a percentage rather than a set dollar amount, because as you get pay increases, by having a percentage, your savings will also get a percent of your pay increases. Whereas with a dollar amount, it will always just be that dollar amount. So, move in that direction, but start, even if you do start small. Okay, and for those that are on the replay, I'm going to finish us out. For those that are live, just hang on tight and I'll be with you in chat and get you your, I like to call it the exit ticket, which is our quiz and survey, and also be available to answer questions as well.